So, welcome to Nazareth, home of the internationally famous Martin Guitars and the Crayola Company and software consulting services, all old businesses, 6 generations at Martin. Crayola Company has been around over 100 years, and we are the longest surviving free press vendor for newspapers under the same ownership and management on this hemisphere. I don't know why that's good. I want to have a special welcome for Dave and Bill, who agreed to come and talk about their experiences with open source technology and Scribus in particular. I think it's delightful to get an outside perspective on those things. And why are we here? Well, we're here to introduce Scribus to newspapers. And let me just briefly say what Scribus is. It is a desktop publishing application. And if you were to compare its functionality to other desktop publishing applications, you would see the same or similar feature set to Quark Express or InDesign or Multi-Ad Creator. Our goal was to see if this technology, which is free open source software, could be used viably for newspaper tasks. And the 2 newspaper tasks that we think of, one is pagination, and the second one is display ad makeup. So the question is, could you use this tool for that? Our principal concern, of course, was with pagination, since our software feeds pagination systems and puts them together. So, Scribus is, incidentally, not developed by a company. It's developed by a community of users called the Scribus community. It has the Scribus exalted developers, a couple of dozen folks who maintain the source and approve additions to the source. Then there's the Scribus creative users, and it's a little hard to get a feel for that community, but ordinarily you would get Scribus as part of a distribution of Linux, because it comes along with it. But many people run Scribus on Windows and Macs, and the latest release, which came out towards the end of last month, was called 1.4.4, and within 24 hours, 35,000 people had actually gone to the effort to download and get the newest version because they want to get it. So in the context of the community, our advisors say there's about 2.5 million users of this. And if you were to consider that at the price of, say, an InDesign license, that would be $1 billion effort, just about exceeding that of Adobe. Okay, so they really were using it, and we have no way of knowing because there's no monitoring, unlike what Adobe's trying to do right now. You can see this is a very large community, has on many platforms, over 9 operating systems, 30 different languages. It's ubiquitous around the world. And for us, here at SCS, the question was, why now? Because Scribus has been around a while, why now? And the answer is, in doing pagination, what you have to do is place images on pages. Okay? And to place an image on a page, you need a format that's compatible with the page and with the image. And one way to do that is to use encapsulated PostScript, which is very good for that. And another way is to use PDFs. But PDFs aren't very good for that, just plain ordinary PDFs. What is good for that is something called PDF/X-1A, which is a image format that's basically a stripped down version of PDF. A PDF can be multiple pages. That gives you something like an ad image that you can put on a page. And you could put it on a page if you built an ad with Scribus. You could put it on a page in InDesign. You could put it on a page with Quark Express, and vice versa. So the Scribus community said, oh, newspapers are interested in this. We aren't going to release it until 1.5. And somebody else said, no, 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 maybe newspapers are worthy of special attention, and we'll release the PDF/X-1A PDFs with Scribus 1.4.4. And when they announced that, I said, oh, now we can support both an EPS workflow with Scribus and a PDF workflow. And since most documents floating around the web are PDFs, not EPSs, this was an opportunity that we had to look at closely. So what does it mean for us to look at something like this closely? Well, first off, in 1987, when a pagination workstation from Hashtag cost $100,000, and Jim Linnane thought he could get, from SI, thought he could get $1 for every page, plus $50,000 a workstation. A program named Quark Express came out that ran on a Mac, and we thought, gee, this is pretty good. This can do placemats, it certainly can do newspaper pages. All we need is an interface between layout and Quark to allow you to do a reasonably efficient production workflow. So that's when we began development on that with the Quark folks, who were nice people in those days, and basically co-invented what are called Quark extensions. So we contributed software to Quark, and they cooperated with us, and in about a year and 3 or 4 months, we had what was called SES links, which enabled people to put ads on pages, put layout geometry into Quark documents, and then put ads on pages. And there's 6 functions to SES links. And with that, we were able to produce the first fully paginated newspaper, daily newspaper in the country, which was in this country, Le Devoir, in French. It's tricky. And we proceeded on from that, and people began abandoning these proprietary or non-commodity, if you will, solutions that were provided by the newspaper vendors in favor of this. In fact, I had a call from Jim Linnane of SII who said to me, Richard, what are you trying to do, put us all out of business? And I said, no, Jim, just you. And he sold out for $46 million and ran for president. It cost him $25,000 for every vote he got in the New Hampshire primary. He did not win, but he had a lot of money. So in the 90s, or was it the 80s, that we developed SCS, that we developed Inlay for InDesign.
Yeah, it was in the 2000s. It was in 2000.
Really? Was
Yes.
that late?
Yep.
Okay, so we did that. We developed, for the Quark stuff, we had to have it AppleScript and Visual Basic, and it's complicated and obnoxious. And then we did similar things for InDesign, same set of functions. And then later, we sort of congealed these things so that they look the same. You know, almost use the same manual for SES links as Inlay. And then we did another version of that in JavaScript, which is the language for writing scripts in design. And finally, in February, I asked William Bader, developer of ours for 82, how long is that? Who lives in Barcelona, to make, using the open source Scribus software, a C++ version of links, and Charles to make a Python version. Okay? So then we had 2 versions to choose from. At the same time, I was writing to the Scribus community representative, Christoph Schaefer, who wrote to me off list. I posted a post on the Scribus list and said, would you, are there any newspaper users of Scribus out there that would like to discuss their use of it, good or bad? And we didn't get any responses from that, but I did get a response from the co-author of this book called the Scribus official manual there. And I would have bought you all copies of it, but Christoph said, no, it's obsolete. You'll need to wait for the next version. So, that's his nature. Suffice to say, while we were doing that, I was working with Marty and asking him for his help in making up these pages. He did a wonderful job of it. You can appreciate that it is human nature to look at something new like this and say, NFW. You know, really, he looked at me like, why would you want to do this? And I would say, just make the pages. And finally, he did, and it was just wonderful. I mean, it was the best thing in the world to work with Marty on things like this. And I want you to all know that how this is coming together is in large part due to his careful and just wonderful attention to helping us bring this off. So, thank you, Marty. Thank you. Okay, so, can free software change the balance of power? Well, what do you think? Let's talk about a few contemporary examples. Linux versus Microsoft Windows. Now, you folks all run layout from us on Linux servers. The nature of that platform is that it scales. So we have, for example, all of Tribune Company running on Linux servers now, and they will soon be consolidated, or are they being consolidated actually? For classified pagination, certainly, in Chicago, and then the layout stuff will move to the cloud there and provide us with some new interesting challenges. But Microsoft no longer owns the territory. You know, they don't own it. They have to deal with the fact that there's an open source operating system that's well engineered for enterprise deployments. And Android versus iOS. Android is the mobile operating system for mobile devices from our friends at Google. I'm not sure we have a friend here or a spy. Understand.
Is there such a thing, open source? I mean, isn't a spy a collaborator as well?
Anyway, of course, Android is a derivative of Linux, and Mr. Jobs was very upset when the Google folks released a mobile operating system that now accounts for 80% of the smartphones shipped. So it is a hugely successful technology. It is open source. You can get a copy of Android, no trouble. Would you download? Is it on GitHub?
Yeah, it's not on GitHub, but Google has it. You can get it from the Google.
Maybe it's on GitHub.
Is it? Okay.
Okay. And dare we say, Craigslist. Does that strike close to home? Craigslist versus newspaper classified. So, here's what I'm saying. Clearly, Scribus can be disruptive technology. Clearly, it's an alternative to paying the digital rights management monthly fees that Adobe wants to collect. Clearly, it's different. Okay, it is different. And the question is, how do you deal with the difference? And the answer is, you can ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, or you can embrace it. And we choose to embrace it. We like things that are different. I mean, it's in my nature. So, and the company reflects that. Everybody here likes doing things different if we can do them better, cleaner, cheaper. Okay? So, are we suggesting this is a competition between Scribus and QuarkXPress Ready Design? Not really. Not really. They're different kinds of things. They're like fruits and nuts. You can eat both of them, but they're different species. Scribus isn't another multi-act creator. Scribus is its own thing. It has a culture around it, has community around it. It has the potential for being a disruptive technology, and we think it's important to newspapers. So what is our role in the Scribus community? Well, semi-officially, since there's no one official role for anything, we are a contributing developer. That means we're not quite blessed enough to be a, quote, central developer where we would actually make contributions to the core of the Scribus, sort of unfettered. They want us to submit our stuff to go through that. And we're not just creatives. You know, we don't just use it. We actually develop things with it. So we have contributed in a number of ways. Most recently, and this is sort of out of order, most recently, come on. The most recent thing we did was to help the Scribus community negotiate with the NAA for NAA ink colors. Does anyone here use SNAP guidelines and NAA? Okay. So the NAA color, the ANPA colors went away. The Scribus people said, we'd like to incorporate the palette for these colors into our mix. No one talked to them. But having worked for the NAA's predecessor, the ANPA, for 7 years, I sort of had a way of approaching them and managed to get convince Carolyn Little, the CEO of the NAA, to sign a release document that allows the palette for NAA colors to be distributed free to the Scribus community, along with Scribus, which is now part of, so this is part of 1.4. And for those of you who are more familiar with this or haven't seen this, this is the NAA ink color book. And what it does is it has colors printed on newsprint, and the idea is that if you take the names of these colors and you use these names with that, when you're talking to an advertiser, what you're promising the advertiser is that you'll make this color. Okay? And newspapers have a hard time with color. You know, many years ago when I was at the AAPA, we had a national campaign to produce ads for the Chrysler company, and we had, I think, 30 or so newspapers lined up to run a full-page ad of a Dodge Ram truck, Dodge Ram truck, and in one or two newspapers, the truck looked like the right color, but in other newspapers, it came out pink. It was just terrible, and the Chrysler company said, never done. So out of that came things like SNAP, Specification for Newsprint Advertising Production. And the NAA participated in that. However, all of the people that who did that are no longer there, so I had to sort of step in and be that person talking to Carol. We also made Scrimlay, Scribus Importer for Layout 8000. And that thing is exactly corresponding, as I mentioned before, to SES links and inlay that I don't think you guys use the importer from CCI, but you use okay. And we added Scribus to the ad launcher, which is part of our ad tracking system, so that you can say, I want to work on this ad, and it knows that, oh, that's a Scribus ad, and it will launch it with the right size and geometries and all that stuff, and all of its components, and incorporate it in the track system. And that was fairly easy to do. So, what does Scribus offer for developers like us? Well, it has Python scripting. Now, Python is a fine language for writing scripts, kind of strange looking to me, but clearly, if you can develop all of what we had in Inlay in just 12 days in Python, you have quite an achievement. Now, it's important to understand what the consequences of this are. One of the consequences is that Scrimlay has to be released under the same licensing terms that Scribus is. And Scribus is released as a free, open source, GPL, general public license. And because the Python scripting capabilities use libraries from Scribus, we have to observe that in our Scrimlay. So with Scrimlay, you have a copy there on the thumb drives, and it's free. It's open source. We give it out. So what we charge $12,000 for in Inlay, you get free from Scribus. This could be a good business model, but I haven't yet figured it out. Also, you get the C++ source, so you can actually go in and, as we said, code up something like Inlay directly in the C++. And we sort of had two programmers working on this. Why are we both working on this? Because I said, one of you will give me something, and both of us did. But we, of course, chose the Python version because it can use the same manual as the SES links. What's really unbelievably neat about Scribus is its document format, internal document format. Something that if you bring up a InDesign document with Notepad on your screen, everything gets, it's all binary data. Cannot figure out what it is. And if you want to get at the components, you have to use a complicated library set of functions from Adobe. Scribus documents are plain text. They have XML markup tags. It's both machine readable and human readable. And it really works. You can actually bring up the document, look at the text, change text around or even formatting or anything else, save it, in just a plain text editor, bring it up in Scribus, and the documents change. So why is this useful? Well, this means that we can use tools that manipulate text, and we have many of them because programs are text, and a Scribus document can be viewed by us as a program for producing an image. So we get the advantage of being able to take newspaper pagination further along with newspaper design. Okay? And the cool part of this is, if you want to figure out how to do new things for pagination, like automation of tasks so they don't go to India, what you need is smart software to do that. And we are developing such software. It's high on our list. And initial product exploration, exploring the algorithms, exploring how the stuff might work, checking it out, is so much easier when you can actually see the document, you can write the Python code, you can test it out. It's so much easier that if you then decide that you have the perfect solution for Scribus and you say, gee, I think I want to have another product for InDesign, you could write that product using those ideas. And I've checked it out. Almost everything that you can do easily in Scribus, you can do more difficultly in Adobe InDesign extensions. In fact, it took me days to find all the functions that I wanted. So I said, oh, So we could actually make a version if someone wanted to stick with InDesign. But it would take less time. In other words, I could do both of those things, a Scribus version and an InDesign version, in less time than I could do an InDesign version. Does that make any sense? It's a better platform for exploring things. So we very much like it. Okay, what does Scribus offer creatives? People who make a badge, well, ubiquitous availability. Ubiquitous availability means you can give this tool to anyone. Anyone in the building, any advertiser you might have. You know, you have it on that card. You can just copy it. Give it to anybody. Anybody can be creative. You can learn a little bit about the customization tools like Python, and you know, perhaps you might want to write some Python scripts to do real estate ads differently, or something else. Very easy and open source. Finally, we very much like the culture of the open source community in general, and the Scribus community in particular. And that community looks at creating new technology from a perspective different from that of commercial vendors. Their first emphasis has always been on stability. You have a new release, it's been tested by sometimes thousands of people, it may have fewer new features and functions than they would have liked to put in, but they're pretty confident that stuff is going to be stable so that when you're working, you don't lose your work. You know, losing your work is a real pain in the tush. So that appeals to me. I've always liked building systems you can rely on. And so that corresponds to the culture we have here. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope you have a good time. Anything that we can do for you, let us know. We are here to make your stay informative and enjoyable.